wanted to talk about that I think is probably the most important thing, and I think people kind of gloss over this, but what I wanted to talk about is your child's responsibility and financial literacy. So I would think about like the questions like, how financially responsible is my child today? And if I was to predict the future, like how financially responsible, or just responsible in general, do I think they're going to be when they're older, like 18, 19, 20? And then how financially literate is your child today? What about when they're a little older, like early adulthood? I think this is super important, primarily because money is kind of like an amplifier. And so hopefully your child is like on a good track and has a lot of responsibility and experience and literacy financially. And so money is really just going to allow them to be a better version of what they already were. But if they're still kind of getting their bearings on things, or maybe they don't have any experience and they're not financially literate, don't have a lot of responsibility, money's just going to make things worse. So I don't think money in itself makes you into a great person. It can amplify kind of whoever you already are as a person. And so I think it's important to really think about these before you start to build up a large Roth IRA for your kids at a young age. So I like to look at this from the extremes. Like most of the time people are somewhere in the middle, but I think it's helpful to look at the extremes. So let's say, hopefully in your scenario, you've been teaching your child financial literacy. Hopefully they're developing responsibility, in particular fiscal responsibility. And even say they're 10 years old and you've already started teaching them about money. They've already been experiencing what money does, how it works, how to make mistakes. They're making mistakes. And you've been intentional about helping them experience finances themselves. You're not just doing everything for them. You've resisted that temptation. I mean, it's tempting as a parent to like do things for your kid or just kind of like shortcut it. But, hopefully you're allowing them to make those mistakes. So they get into the teen years and, maybe they get through that without developing any bad habits, any serious bad habits. Everybody makes mistakes, but maybe they're transitioning into adulthood. And as far as you can tell, they're on a really solid track to make solid financial decisions, even at that young age, or at least like talk to you for advice before they make big moves. I think this is a prime situation. Like if this is going to pan out like this, like the Roth IRA is fantastic because it can give your child like a leg up and a head start. And it really can even be a vehicle to teach them and allow them to experience managing finances and see what it's like to put their hard-earned money to work. Hopefully they've learned the lessons of like what hard work is. That I think helps with all this as well. Like if they've put in the hard work to earn the money themselves, and that goes back to what we were talking about before, like legitimate, like if they're legitimately working, that teaches them the benefit of hard work. And then they're also learning the benefits of compound interest and growing in a Roth IRA. And then they've developed some good habits and they're becoming an adult. That's a good position to be able to transition this to them and not put them in a worse spot, and maybe even help them quite a bit. Because that's, at the end of the day, I know that's what we as parents want to do. On the other hand, so we'll paint the picture with the other extreme of not a great scenario. So let's say instead of teaching them fiscal responsibility and financial literacy, you're pretty much doing everything for them. So they haven't really experienced anything in terms of managing finances or taking responsibility for them things themselves as a child. And how would they if you're doing it all for them? So maybe you've taken a proactive step to max out Roth IRAs for them every year from your business, but maybe they're not actually working any. So at best, it's questionable. So they're not really learning that lesson of hard work. Maybe they don't even know that they're funding a Roth IRA. They definitely don't look at the statements. They haven't learned much about how it works or what, compound interest is. So in the early years, it's not a big deal. Like everything's going fine and they're, getting through childhood. But when they start to reach like the teen years or like 16, 17, 18, 19, maybe they make a few bad decisions and develop some bad habits like a lot of us did. Like everybody's going to make bad decisions, but they're experiencing some of these things and haven't developed a responsibility yet. And, when you don't have that responsibility muscle developed, you're prone to bad habits. So in this situation, so maybe they have like alcohol abuse or, drug addiction or something like that. Like that's a worst case scenario. None of us want that to happen. But if you've been building up this Roth IRA and you add that to the mix, it's going to be throwing gasoline on the fire. It's not going to help them. It's going to make things worse. Now, I know that financial responsibility doesn't directly translate to responsibility in general, but I do think that there's some overlap. Responsibility in general, typically people that are responsible are also oftentimes fiscally responsible. So I think adding more money to the mix in this situation can put your children in a worse position than they were otherwise. I've come across people that have, gotten into this situation where they are worried about what's going to happen when their child gets access to their Roth IRA, because they know that they're going to blow it on potentially dumb stuff and, or to fund their bad habits. So I think I mentioned this because I think it's really important to think about that. Like when you're thinking about funding a Roth IRA, it's important to think about what your future looks like for your child and how it ties into their own responsibility and literacy. And I think that the sooner you think about that, the better. You can also help them to get to a point of being responsible and gaining that literacy as you build it up. But we just want to avoid, as a parent myself, I don't ever want to put my kid in a position where, they might be worse off because of something I did. So I think, like I said, it's not a direct translation to responsibility overall and fiscal responsibility. And there is also this layer of uncertainty. Some parents do a fantastic job teaching their children responsibility and good habits and teaching them about finances and they do all the things, and just things don't go as planned and their child makes some bad decisions or ends up in the wrong circles, and they can have some problems. So there is that uncertainty that goes along with this whole strategy as well that you got to think about. Sometimes things don't go as planned, and you want to ideally not be in a position where you're making things worse because of the unfortunate circumstances.